Not doing it horizontally? That's not what I.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Lindsay Sparks, and she is here to talk to you about yoga for musicians. And I'm going to let her take over from this point.
All right. So, hi, everybody. Yes. So I'm Lindsay Leach Sparks, and I am another flutist. Is everybody a flutist here so far? Yeah. Okay. Cool. I invited my flutists as well and some non-flutists. So I don't know if we'll get anybody coming in that's not a flutist, but musicians have all kinds of so that'll work out. But I teach flute at Valdosta State University in Georgia. So it's probably a little warmer in the south than it is up there with you guys right now, but you know, fall's here anyway. So what I thought maybe we could do today, I don't know, do you all have mats or a place to sit or stable chair? What's your environment look like today?
We have a carpet and we have chairs.
Okay, we could definitely, I have a piano bench that I can use as a chair to kind of do a little bit of stuff. And then if you want to try to, you know, just sit on the floor, that might work too, as long as you've got a stable seat. I've got a very tight hip today, so I might move from one to the other and move around a little bit. So a couple of things that I thought would be good to talk about today is posture in general and just sort of general anatomy things that we need to know as flutists or as musicians, you know, kind of as a whole. How those things affect breathing, how they might affect different places that we harbor tension in our bodies, because obviously tension is the enemy, right? I shouldn't say completely the enemy. I mean, we need a little bit of tension to do some things, but obviously we don't want too much. And then I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about maybe performance anxiety and, you know, kind of mindfulness and things like that that are just beneficial in daily life, obviously to anybody, but for musicians especially, you know, they're really useful for focus during practice time and making sure that, you know, when we do have performances that they are as free of tension and anxiety as possible. So so that's sort of my thinking with the session today. And before we get started, I'll come up to the computer so I can kind of see what's happening here. So does anybody have any requests or have any tension in any part of their body they really want to like have addressed today? Because you might have something that you really hope to get out of this session that is just not on my radar.
For me, it's hip tension, and then for I think a lot of them, jaw.
Oh, they're related. Isn't that funny?
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, we can definitely work on that.
Does anyone else have anything else to add? They're all young. They have no aches and pains yet. It's
lucky. Well, you know, I have to say when I was young, I didn't have any aches and pains either. I have always enjoyed yoga. I didn't really get into yoga, honestly, until I was pregnant. You know, prenatal yoga is like really big business, and everybody says you need to get more exercise, you know, and then I started. After I started and my first was born, I kind of just kept doing it, you know, because I realized it was very relaxing. And, you know, I had, in fact, if we're talking about injuries, performance injuries, I never had a problem playing the flute, pretty much ever. But after my daughter was born, my first was born, I developed something called mommy thumb, which is it's de Quervain tendonitis. So I don't know if anybody has had tendonitis or suffers from tendonitis, but if you stretch out your hand and you've got this little kind of groove here in your thumb, it's the outer tendon. That's the de Quervain tendon. And I had it in both of my hands. And they call it mommy thumb because you're constantly manipulating the baby. You know, you're lifting and you're putting them down the bassinet, you're changing diapers and you're nursing and you're moving things around. But it also had to do with fluid retention and, you know, stuff like that. And it was incredibly painful. And that I couldn't write my name. Like I couldn't hold a pencil, And so that experience, actually, I had to change the way that I did yoga. I had to modify almost everything I did because, for example, if I was doing a plank, I couldn't do this. Like I couldn't have my hands here. I couldn't, that I would not have been able to like hold myself up doing that. So, so I did a lot of modifications on my knuckles and on my elbows, and got, really good at basically going to yoga class and just kind of redoing whatever they taught because my arms wouldn't work. So that was a really kind of eye-opening experience. And then I continued doing it until I decided, I think it was maybe end of 2018, getting into 2019, that I really wanted to get certified to teach yoga. And at the time, everything was like a summer program. They were all like, you have to come for 6 weeks in the summer. And it was like the same time as the NFA convention or something. And I was never able to get away. And then, of course, during 2020, everything went online. And so that was my opportunity. And that was when I got certified. So I actually have a certification in like a 200-hour certification to teach yoga, just kind of general practice yoga. And then I have a prenatal certification because I really enjoyed my prenatal yoga. Yeah, so I've got all kinds of good things to send here with modification. But if we're ready to kind of get going, and if you think of something along the way, feel free to type it into the chat, or like, I don't know if you can still raise a hand with the new Zoom update, but feel free to let us know, and we can always, shift gears or go in another direction here. So if you guys can find a comfortable seat, either on a chair or on the ground, and what I like to do is start an easy pose, but you can start in any pose that is really comfortable for you. So I was mentioning that I've got a very tight hip on my left side today. So I might actually just start here, right? Because my knees feel pretty good and my hip is a little bit tighter. But if you like the easy pose, that's another option. You could also do, legs straight out or butterfly, right? That's all fine. Whatever is comfortable for you. And I might switch positions midway. But what you want to do is find your sit bones, and your sit bones are the very bottom of your pelvis. Okay. When we sit, anytime we sit, we're sitting in an ensemble or to practice, or even in class. I know sometimes that's not easy, but you want to try to find those two bones right there on the bottom of your bum, right? And the reason is because if you find those, then your pelvis is actually tilted in the right direction. Okay, your pelvic bowl isn't tilted too far backward. And if you can find them, that also means that your tailbone is going to be tilted away from you, right? So if I'm facing this way, and you can see my profile, right? I've got my sit bones here, my tailbone's going back that way. Okay. And think about this. If you're slouching in a chair and doing this, or, whatever we're doing, you're actually sitting on your tailbone that way. So what you want to do is free that up so that the top of your head can kind of float easily on the top of your spine. And your spine should have 4 natural curves, right? So you kind of have a little curve going in here, a curve outward on your shoulders, inward on your ribs, and then your hips and your tailbone kind of go opposite. So what you want to do is find that place. And from your sit bones up, like I said, can you allow your spine to be as neutral as possible so that your skull, right between your ears, is the top of your spine. Your skull can kind of sit easily on the top of your spine there, and find a neutral place for your arms. Your shoulders should sort of be in alignment with your ears, but you don't want to pull them back, right? Just allow them to fall kind of as naturally as possible from sort of that alignment of your ears, right? And you can keep your eyes open or closed while you're here, but take an inventory of your body. So like I said, my left hip is feeling kind of tight today. You might have tension in a shoulder. Or your head, flutist, might be tilted to the right. Mine often does that, and I have to consider where I am in space and kind of realign it a little bit. You might have one leg higher than the other, right? Whatever it is, just absorb that that's the way you are today. Take a little mental note. So as you're moving through any of these poses, you can, give yourself some room or some, adjustment as needed. And let's try taking what we call a pranayama breath. Okay, pranayama in yoga is, if you translate it directly, it's life force. Okay, so in yoga, what we think of is we think of breathing in through our nose. We're going to fill up our lower abdomen, our middle, and then our chest. So applicable to flute playing, since we like to think of filling up nice and low to get as much bang for our buck breath-wise as possible. But why don't we try a couple of those breaths here, and keeping everything as neutral as you can. You're just concentrating on the air filling the spaces. So you're basically going to fill your belly button, mid chest, and then upper chest. Okay, so breathe in, middle, upper, and now breathe out the same way. Pull your belly button toward your spine and breathe out from the lower, middle, upper. And breathe in again. Lower, middle, upper, and exhale, navel spine, lower, middle, upper. Let's do that maybe 3 more times in your own pace. Okay, so in, I'm breathing out through my mouth, but you could do either in or out through your mouth. Maybe one more breath. And come to a neutral place with your spine. Let your left hand kind of float out to the side and your right one float up. And then just keep your left going. And we're going to kind of stretch the right side. Sorry, this probably looks opposite, but I don't know if my picture is flipped or not. You're going to stretch your right side. You don't want to collapse. You want to keep looking either up or to the front. And then walk your left hand back until you're straight up again and down. And then do the same thing with your right side. You're going to go out and up, and then just keep walking with that hand. Keep your neck as neutral as possible, or you could even look up. And as you're doing this, see if you can keep your hip down, right? Your sit bones, and walk back. And let's do that one more time now that you're aware of your sit bones too. We always want to keep those attached to the floor if we can. Left hand out and up and over. And back up. And then down and out and up and over to the other side. Up, sit bones. There we go. And then down. Good. And walk your hands out in front of you. If your feet are in front of you, you might not be able to go as far, but walk them out in front to stretch forward a little bit. And let your neck come down to stretch the back. Back up for a minute. You might feel a stretch in your hips. Back here. Anybody feel that? I do. But if you don't and you feel it in your spine, that's fine too. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. Out. And up. And then if you have, knees, or put your hands out around you somewhere, what you want to do is twist as much as you can. Only do this if you're comfortable doing it, to the right. So if you have a neck problem or a shoulder problem, you might not be able to go as far. But what you want to do is breathe in nice and tall, and then twist and look over the right shoulder. That's what I'm doing first, is the right side. So my right hand is back, my left hand's forward. Untwist, breathe in, and breathe out and twist and look over the right shoulder again. And take note of those sit bones. Are the sit bones still attached to the floor? Breathe in and out. Good. And back to the front. And try the other side. So I did the right side. I'm going to do the left. I'm going to move my left arm back and my right arm in front or on my knee. Breathe in nice and tall, and then twist, exhale, and look over your left shoulder. And then in, and twist around again. One more time, breathe in, and twist, look back. Good. Okay, and now, depending on where you're sitting and how you're sitting, come on up to all fours. So there are 6 different ways to twist and warm up your spine. Okay, we had the side to side, we had front, and then we had 2 twists. Now we're going to go backward. Okay, basically. So go ahead and find, I'm going to do this sideways. You can do however you're comfortable in your space. And does anybody have sensitive wrists? If you have sensitive wrists, you could basically do the exact same thing we're going to do now. We're going to do all fours. You could do it on fists, okay, if that is more comfortable. Or you could even do it on your elbows if you want to. It's going to put a little bit of a different strain on your upper back, but it's not going to hurt to do that. So what you want to do is come to all fours. So this is a tabletop position. And like I said, we're warming up our spine. So cat-cow is fantastic for this. And this is why it's called cat-cow. Whenever you look up and tilt your hips up, right? That's the cow. That's inhaling. And then you exhale, rounding your back. That's the cat. Okay? So let's try a couple cat-cows. You want to inhale, look to the ceiling, and feel the stretch. I feel a stretch in my lower abdomen. And then down. That's cat. Cow. And cat. And you want to try to keep your shoulders away from your ears as much as you can, just so that you're working on your spine more than the shoulders. And cat. Maybe one more. Cow. And cat. So speaking of shoulders, what I want to do now while we're in this position is something called thread the needle. This is really good for your shoulders, especially in the back, kind of your trapezius area. And what you do, I'll demonstrate it, and I'm going to go to the right side first. Okay. So basically you're in your all fours and you send out your right hand, take your left hand and thread it underneath your right. And then you can stretch your right out a little bit further. So the left hand is on the ground and the right is extended. And what you're looking for is a stretch in your left shoulder. And that opens up the back a little bit. That's really good for breathing and also good for hand problems if you have wrist and hand issues, because believe it or not, you know, everything is connected and your hands actually start in the center of your back. So I always think about that, you know, when I'm playing, because holding up the flute, even though it's not that heavy, it's not an easy task. We are very asymmetrical, right? So stretching out this part of my back really helps me kind of just with the weight of the instrument. So let's try it one more time. You got your right hand out, left hand, feed it through. There we go. Ah, this feels good. So take a couple of breaths here and just enjoy the opener. And then move your right hand back when you're ready. Push up and release your left shoulder. I'm gonna switch sides here so I can do my left side and you can see it and I'm not facing away from you. But go ahead and switch to your other side. So your left side, put your left hand out, walk it out as far as it's comfortable. Take your right arm, feed it through, and let your left continue on as far as you can and lay on your right shoulder with your head down. My right shoulder is always tighter than my left. I think that's like a flute thing. Violinists have it the other way around. The right shoulder is usually looser than the left shoulder. My husband's a violinist, so. All right. Maybe come up out of the pose just for a minute. Kind of shake it out. And then do one more. Send your left hand out and your right hand threading through. And your right shoulder. Gets a little stretch. One thing I should mention as we come up out of this pose is that if you ever find that you're holding your breath, try to remember that the breath never really stops, right? We try not to, hold it or forget to breathe in. And that's not usually the case. Usually it's holding the breath while we're trying to get into a pose, right? That usually is not something we want to do. We want to try to keep it going. And if you feel the need to hold your breath, it might mean that you have to change your position a little bit. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Since hips were on the agenda for today, I mean, we could do a whole bunch of different things related to balance and symmetry and all kinds of stuff that's great for flute playing or music in general. But let's maybe look at hips because as I was saying, hips and jaw are actually related items. So when we're forming in the womb, right, we divide basically and divide and divide and divide, right? Cells start dividing and then basically we get to a point in our development as an embryo where we literally do split in half, right? Where half of the cells become the placenta and the other half become the baby, okay? And as the baby develops, there's actually a nerve bundle in the embryo that continues to form. And the bottom end of the nerve bundle becomes the bottom of the spinal area, essentially. And the top end comes up to the top. And so we actually do have a nerve connection between our hips and our jaw. There are also, I mean, your hip joint is a ball and socket joint. It's not a hinge like your jaw, but we often do hinge at our hips, right? And it's a very common movement, especially when we're getting up and sitting up and standing, or I should say sitting down and standing up, all day long. It's kind of, we do that a lot. We don't often, like my sister is a ballerina, we don't often do like this thing. We can, but it's not like our daily life. So it's a lot of bending. And that's sort of our middle joint. So it's very, very common and more common in women than men actually to harbor tension in our hips. And that tension in our hips can actually translate into tension in our jaw, which is crazy, but it happens. Likewise, if you are like a grinder, like you grind your teeth at night, you often will carry tension in your jaw that then will exhibit in other places. I mean, generally speaking, it does exhibit in your hips, but if you have a hip problem, it doesn't always come across as a hip problem. It might come across as a lower back problem, right? Because of the symmetry of balance between our front and our backs. It might be that you feel it in your back rather than your hip, but essentially your hip is too tight. right? That kind of thing happens a lot. So, so it's just something to consider, you know, as you're going through this. If you do have tension in either one of these places, again, be nice to yourself, okay? Because you're not going to cure it in a single yoga class, but you also don't want to make it worse. Gentle stretch is totally where the most benefit comes in. So anyway, let's go ahead and work on this a little bit. So we were here, right? And on our all fours. Can we, we'll do a little bit of stretching. I'll tell you what, let's start sitting. Forget that I said that. Let's start sitting and then we'll go back to the other one because it's a good segue. So if you can, see if you can put your feet together as a little butterfly pose. And like I said, I've got a tight hip today, so my left side is going to be much higher than my right. If your knees don't come to the floor, don't worry about it. Not a biggie. And what we're going to do, there's a couple of different things we can do here. Let's see, you know, what's going to be the most beneficial for us. I'll tell you what, pick one side. I'm going to pick my left side. Go ahead and put that foot out and bring your right foot in. And remember, you want your sit bones to be on the floor as long as you can. All right. And one thing that is something I feel in this stretch, I feel the inside of my leg. So you should kind of feel that going if you can. Okay. This hip being on the side, now take your right foot and move it to the corner or the center of the crease of your left hip. Okay. And if it doesn't go all the way, that's all right. Okay. But you might feel something on the back side of this hip, depending on how flexible you are there. Okay. So if this is enough for you, stay here. If you want a little bit more, pick your knee up and put it on the outer side of your knee, of your left knee. Now you might feel more stretch in here. Okay. This probably is where most of us will be, right? I might not be this far on the other side. We'll see. What you want to do is hug your knee into your chest with your opposite hand. So this is my right leg, left arm. Okay. And just like we did at the beginning, we're actually going to do a little bit of a twist. So see if you can get a little length through your right side, lift your right arm up, and then out and back. And for me, my tendency is to pull my foot off the mat. If you can put your foot down, you get an even bigger stretch off the back side of your hip. So breathe in, and then as you exhale, twist a little bit. Look over your right shoulder. Breathe in again. And exhale and twist a little deeper. There you go. Okay, last one. Let's breathe in one last time. And then we're done. Come around and relax that leg. Stretch it out. Sometimes there's some tension that gets in there. Okay. Now, opposite leg. Take that in. Just start here with this. This is kind of a lot for me today, actually. We'll just have to see how far I get. Okay, because my hip wants to pop up on the right side. So if you find that's happening, this might be where you stay for your stretch. And if you want to, you can, this is like a modified lotus pose, basically. So you're putting your foot kind of on the inside of your other hip. Look how far up my knee is. Don't worry about being low. Try this one. And that's okay. All right. You can move it to the outside of the knee. Okay, the other knee. So one of those three spots. And you want to hug with your opposite arm. Get some length in your left side. Inhale and exhale, look over your shoulder. Inhale, get some length. exhale, a little bit deeper stretch. Don't twist. And when I say exhale, I always need to pull the belly button toward the spine. So that might inhibit your stretch if you're exhaling another place. So inhale, nice and tall. Exhale over. All right. That's the outer side of the hip. Now, I think we could probably do a little bit of other stuff. If, let's see, how many of you can lay down on the floor? You're okay laying on the floor? So I'll exhibit a couple of different things and then you do whatever you need to do. There are, and I'll pull my piano bench over. If you're on the floor, okay, go ahead and lay down, keep your knees bent, and put one of your ankles over the opposite knee. Okay, this is sometimes called a figure four or a seated pigeon. So you have this sort of, you know, angle here with the one arm. Take your arms with the opposite leg and hug them and then pull them into your chest. So again, you should feel a stretch in the hip back here, right? And you might be able to go further with one leg than the other. So that's a possibility. And then if you like the laying down one, you could try it on the other side too. You know, left foot over the right knee, pull the right knee in, give it a little hug, right? If you don't have the ability to lay down, or that feels like a little too much, let's see. The best that I'm sitting there. So what you can do is sit on a chair. This is my like super old piano bench. On a chair, you basically do the same thing. So you take one foot over the other ankle and you could just let this be, and that stretches out the back side of your hip, right? You can't pull it up a whole lot, but you know, it is possible, you know, for you to come down, right? Or something like that. Okay. Nothing urgent. I always worry when my phone goes off. So whichever position you have elected, I'm going to go back to the floor. Try each side one more time. And I'm going to do my left side. I need a little more TLC on that side today. This way. And then so you're either sitting and folding forward, or you're laying down in a figure four. And then the other foot. Okay. Now, we haven't stretched the front side of our hip yet. So like I said, we have a ball and socket joint, but we hinge very frequently, right? So those are kind of the back side of the hips. What I'd like to do to stretch the front side, let's go ahead and stand for a minute. And again, you might have to adjust for your space. Often what, and you guys can't really see me, can you? Often what we do in yoga to start our practice is called a sun salutation. And there's some really nice movements in sun salutation, but we're just going to do a little bit of it. Okay. And it's just basically to kind of get moving. Woo. There. That's fine. Okay. I thought it was a spider. Never mind. I don't do spiders. Let's go ahead and find a comfortable place. It could be the front of your mat, it could be the top of your mat, it could be whatever. But in mountain pose, we generally have, I've been taught to put my toes together in mountain pose, but honestly, for me, that feels very uncomfortable. I don't know why. I'm not built that way. So I usually keep mine kind of facing forward. And you want to feel all points of your foot. So the top left of your toe or the ball of your foot and the top right of the ball of your foot the back of your heels on either side, right? Like you've got 4 points on each foot. Okay. Your knees aren't locked, right? They're nice and loose. And we basically took exactly what we were doing when we were sitting and we moved it into a standing position. So this is our mountain pose. And what we want to do is basically what we call an Utkatasana, which is a forward fold. Okay, so we raise our hands up and breathe in, and then swan dive out over our legs. So we are folded here. Now I'm going to turn to the side so you can see me. So I'm folding at my hip. Okay, if you're folding at your back, you're not going to get very far down. So what you want to do, since we just stretched out the back side of our hips, is try to fold at your hip and see if you can get your chest toward your legs. My legs are not straight, you know, that's not the goal. The goal is to feel it back here. So you want to get as close to the ground as you can, and if you can touch it, that's even better. If not, that's okay. All right. And then come up halfway so you have a flat back. Sometimes this is called monkey pose, okay? And I often will, not on your knees, but you can put your hands on your thighs or on your shins just for stability so that you really feel the sit bones going backward, okay? And you get another stretch back here. And you go back down. Let that all hang out. And then come back up. Breathe in. And then usually we bring our hearts to the center. So that's a very basic little forward fold sun salutation. Let's just do that one more time. And I'll stay sideways because I think it might be easier to see me that way. But you know, whatever orientation you have in your space is totally fine. So arms up and breathe in. And swan dive down. Hinge at the hips. Inhale halfway. Send your hips back. Exhale. Inhale back up. And exhale to your heart center. Okay. So honestly, that little piece is something I like to do in the mornings. Like, well, if I practice in the morning, sometimes I'm practicing at midnight, but when I practice, when I go to first practice, that's usually how I warm up my body. It's just like a couple forward folds because it really gets almost everything you need. You're going to get your back and your hips, your legs, right? Your support structure, and your arms and all of this breathing apparatus under here. So it's actually just, you know, super fast, really easy way to just, and you don't have to lay on the floor in your practice room. I mean, who wants to do that? They're gross. You know what I mean? So it's a really easy thing to do there. Let's see if we can stretch the front of our hip, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about like performance anxiety and some asanas that could help with that. So the front side of the hip, the easiest thing to do is actually a pigeon. So we did a seated pigeon or figured four earlier, and there are two asanas. One is the pigeon and one is the fish, or sorry, not fish, wheel or bridge. They'll both do it. So let's do this. Let's do pigeon first, and then we'll do the wheel pose or the bridge pose. So let's start with our asana for our sun salutation. So you raise your arms and breathe in, and swan dive over your legs, and halfway lift. Send your hips back. There we go. Back down. Now instead of inhaling to go up, walk out to a downward dog. This is a good one too, because it really is hinging from your hips. So you want your hips to stick up. It doesn't really matter that your legs aren't straight. You want your hips to stick up. Now from here, come out to, if you can, come out to a plank, or you could do all fours. Either's fine. Take your right leg and put your knee up by your right hand. So from this direction, it looks like this. Okay. Now, the further across that you get your right leg, the deeper the stretch will be. But you don't have to for this. This is easy enough to do this way. So go where you're comfortable and then send your left hip back. So let me do it this direction so you can see what I'm doing. I'm sending my left hip back. And then for me, I'm going to put my hands forward. So you can stay on your elbows. You could go all the way down, put your head on the mat if you wanted to, or you could just kind of chill here for a minute, which is what I'm going to do. So there's two places that you find a stretch. One should be the back of your right hip, and the other should be your left hip flexor. Okay. So this is a great pose for actually getting both of those, stretches. If you still feel the need for a stretch here in your left side, especially, you can come up, and that puts a little more strain on the front side of the hip. So you could kind of feel it here, right? And if you're really looking for a good stretch, you could do what's called a king pigeon and get the back of your left foot up. And that pulls this a whole lot. So you're really stretching the front hip flexor of that left side. But honestly, those are not requirements, right? Those are all just little modifications to give you a little bit more. So find your spot that you're comfortable with. And if you have a blanket or a pillow or a block or something that you want to put under your right hip, that's also fine because it is popped up. Let me turn around so you can see this side. Okay, so here's my right side and my left side. See, my right hip's not touching the floor, and that's okay. So you can put something under there if you feel uncomfortable, right, with that, or you could just let it stretch, whichever's your choice today. Okay. So find your spot, take one more breath in where you are. And always when you exhale, you want to try to deepen your pose. So whatever stretch you're getting to on your exhale, make sure that you're getting way deeper in your pose, as deep as you can, comfortably. And then to come out, come up on your hands, pull your left foot in underneath you, and then your right foot back in your tabletop. Now, just for a second, let's do a quick child's pose. Child's pose can be done a couple of different ways, but basically you sit back with your hips on your heels and stretch your hands out with your head down on your mat, right? If you want to, you can do a wide child's pose and keep your knees wide. You get a little bit deeper in the middle, but again, you have to listen to your hips, okay? So if that is okay for you, great. And if it's not, don't do it. You can get a decent stretch with the other child's pose just as easily. Okay, when you exhale next and inhale and sit up, let's do the other side of your pigeon. So from here, you're on all fours, or we did from plank earlier, right? You do either one. You take your left knee toward your left hand and put your shin as far across as you can. Mine's not going to go very far today. That's okay. And send your right leg back. So again, you're getting a stretch in your left hip and your right hip flexor, right? And you can come down just like you did, pick a modification from the other side. So you can come down on your elbows. You can go all the way down to the mat. If you want to do that, you can put a pillow under your left hip and kind of support yourself that way. You can come up a little bit to get a deeper stretch in the right hip flexor. You could center your left hand and grab your right foot for a king pigeon pose. Just for a really deep stretch in here in that quad. Whatever is comfortable for you today. Pick a spot and breathe in, and then when you exhale, exhale into the stretch so you get as much benefit from that stretch as possible. Okay, and on the next inhale, go ahead and drag your right foot back and move your left to meet it and come back into your child's pose. Now, this might feel a little bit different now that you stretched out the other side. So it's something to consider. You know, you might have some tension in one side where you didn't feel it before, or maybe it's gone where you felt it earlier. When you're ready, come to seated. And there's one more for hips we can do, which will segue us a little bit into the other asanas for performance anxiety that I wanted to try. So bridge pose is really good. And I realized recently doing some bridges in another class I was teaching that I just don't do enough bridges. Bridges or wheel poses. Wheel poses are basically a back bend, but bridge poses are really great for your abs, but they also give you a good stretch across your hip flexor. So a bridge pose, this is going to be hard to do if you're seated in a chair, but if you have room on the ground, you can do it, or you can try it later. The feet are on the floor, and they're actually just a little closer in toward you than they might normally be. And what you want to do is push through your heels and raise your bum off the ground. And you're going to feel a stretch in here. And what I do, you know, you can push with your hands, make sure your shoulders are underneath you, your shoulder blades, and then hold your hands together underneath. That's the fullest expression of this pose. And what you want to do is breathe it in as deeply as you can. And then when you exhale, see if you can keep your hips up, basically, because that's the tendency is to let them down. And when you're ready to release this, you release your hands and your shoulders. Take a breath in. And as you exhale, you want to slowly lower one vertebrae at a time toward the mat. This is also really good for strengthening our core, but the muscles around those hip flexors. Because again, we carry a lot of tension because we're up and down, up and down, up and down. So the more we can kind of, you know, give them stability, the better off we are usually. Let's try one more bridge. So reposition your feet if you have to. Okay, and breathe in. Breathe out and push through your heels. Get up to where you're comfortable. And you can interlock your hands if you're able. If not, maybe just keep your shoulders underneath. Be careful not to let your knees go wide. You want to try to keep them right over your heels. And when you're ready on the next exhale, go ahead and start lowering one vertebrae at a time. Very controlled. There we go. And then you can kind of relax. So, since we're on the floor, we can transition a little bit into some asanas that are really great for performance anxiety. We've already done one, which is the child's pose. That's a really good meditative pose. If you're able to do it, you know, and you're in not a dirty practice room where you're gonna put your face against the carpet, but you know, in your own space or something on your bed. I love child's pose on it. It's great. That's a really good one, just for a little bit of, you know, mindfulness or meditation. So what you could do is get into your child's pose and practice that breathing that we started with, where you fill from the bottom and then the middle and then the upper chest, and then exhale it the same way. Very easy to do that. One thing about performance anxiety is that it's a function of our autonomic nervous system, of our sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system. And that basically means that it's automated. It's not something that we can consciously control. And it's like that for a reason. It's our amygdala, basically our lizard brain. It's the most primitive part of our brain that, as we receive information from the outside world, for whatever reason, that part of our brain senses danger and triggers our fight or flight, sequence. And we get a lot of adrenaline and cortisol pumping through our veins. And so that's why when we get nervous, we often have shaky limbs, shaky hands, it's just sweaty hands, right? That kind of stuff. Rapid heart rate. Our body is getting ready to run away, basically. You might get an upset stomach. And that's because the parasympathetic nervous system, that is the other end of the autonomic spectrum, that deals with the rest and digest part of our nervous system, that basically gets shut down, right? So sympathetic and parasympathetic are in this balance, and when sympathetic goes crazy, parasympathetic kind of gets out of the way, right? And parasympathetic deals with all of the stuff that's other normal daily functions, right? Like eating and digestion and things like that. So usually when we are nervous, we get some of these symptoms, and we see them in the form of rapid heart rate and shakiness and sweaty palms and an upset stomach and that kind of thing. The question then is, if this is going to happen because my lizard brain is just sensing danger, what do I do about it? I mean, can you do anything about it? And there are some people that, swear that they don't get nervous anymore. And maybe that's true. But I think it's a real shame if you don't get nervous, because, that's a lot of the excitement of performing comes from that, especially for the audience. But, for us too. I mean, I don't know if any of you have ever sat through a performance that was just completely emotionally flat. It's like torture. You don't really want to go that direction. So we have this we like having a nervous system, right? It's just that we don't want it to get out of control to the point where it obstructs our ability to be able to create our art form, right? So the issue then is, your sympathetic nervous system is going to react this way. How do you temper the reaction so that it doesn't go out of control, right? And that is trickier, because you can't just talk to your amygdala. You can't just be like, okay, dude, you just have to calm down. It's not a lion. It's just an audience. I'm not going to fall off a cliff. I'm just going to go play the flute. It's not that. It's an innate part of us, right? So the only way to really talk to that part of our nervous system is either through breathing or movement, because it doesn't understand English, right? Or any other language except breathing and movement. So while we're on the floor, one of my favorite asanas, and I do this one regularly because it's just awesome for stress relief and, anything related to it, is the legs up wall. So I don't have a great wall here, but I'm going to do this against my piano, I think. And you could do it against a chair if you wanted to, if you also are lacking wall space. So what you're going to do, assume this is your wall, okay? You can get right up to the wall, and so that your hip is touching the wall, you lay down and then put your feet up the wall, okay? Now, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to put mine up here on the piano bench, but if you had a wall, you would be straight up, right? And you can find any position that's comfortable for you here. You can put your hands on your stomach, or out to the side, or down, by your bum, whatever. This position, your adrenaline reaction basically dilates your blood vessels, and your blood vessels, especially the big ones going to the big muscles, are going to be completely filled, right, when you have that reaction. So the idea is that this literally does drain blood back toward you and toward your larger muscle groups, toward your brain, and toward like all the other organs that are part of your parasympathetic nervous system, like your stomach and your liver and your kidneys, right? You're gonna get some of that oxygen back to the other parts of your body. And that alone is enough to kind of allow that adrenaline reaction to subside just a little bit. It's not going to take care of everything, but I do have to say this position for 5 or 10 minutes in the morning is just about as good for me as a beta blocker. And I've experimented with those too. But for I think a normal kind of you have to play a big audition or performance, you have a recital or something like that, in the afternoon or the evening, and you get up in the morning, you're like, okay, today's the day, come do this, because it really does, it kind of helps reset things a little bit. You might have to do it more than once, and you might have to do it regularly, or 5 minutes at a time or something like that, but worth it. So that's the legs of the well. Whenever you're ready, you can kind of slowly roll out of it, however is comfortable, because that's a hard one to get in and out of. The other one is basically, like I said before, the easy pose, right? Well, you could do your child's pose, but if you find an easy pose that you feel like you can do a little bit of rhythmic breathing, remember that breathing is the other thing that speaks to your amygdala. So breathing in a very, I don't want to say breathing gym kind of way. Music ed people might know the breathing gym, where like you breathe in for 4 and then out for 4. And then you breathe in for 4 and then out for 6. And you breathe in for 4 and out for 8. And you breathe in for 2 and out for 8. You know what I mean? So what you're doing is you're slowly allowing your heart rate, to kind of come down. You're intentionally telling your heart, chill, right? So we can try that a little bit. We did a little bit of pranayama earlier, but let's just experiment with that. And I like to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth. You could breathe in and out through your nose if you like. Fill up down low first, and then see if you can make it a instead of a kind of 3-point motion, see if you can just do it all in one kind of big motion, right? So breathing in, breathing out, and it's always from your navel, basically. And let's try it first, in for 4 and out for 4. Okay, and I'll just set a random tempo. This is completely random. Okay, so breathe in for 4, out, in, out, now in for 4, out for 6. For 4, for 6. 4, out for 8. For 4, for 8. That was just a little tiny bit. You could obviously keep going, right? That's something that really helps. And then there's another pranayama that's really fun to do just in the last minute here. It's called a Shatali breath. Basically, when your adrenaline starts going, you've got a elevated body temperature, right? And so one of the ways to cool that off, and again, kind of practice this rhythmic breathing to talk to your sympathetic nervous system, is through a cooling breath. So can you all do this? Yeah. If you can't do that, you might want to breathe through your teeth. And if you have sensitive teeth, you may want to just get your tongue close to the roof of your mouth So you can kind of breathe in that way. But the idea is that you're breathing in through this straw that you've made through your tongue, or at least a cool position between your tongue and your teeth, that then you can, kind of do a rhythmic breath with, but bring in cool air that helps to lower your body temperature. So let's just try a couple breaths and then we'll be done for today. So you can find a comfortable seat, but I'm going to stay close to the computer so you can see what I'm doing. So, okay. So get ready with your straw and we'll breathe in for 4. Ready? Breathe in again. So your mouth's probably pretty dry now too, but but that's the cooling breath. It's a Chatali breath. Does anyone have any last minute questions for me?
So maybe how can they get in touch with you if they would like to do more of this? You know, obviously like WKU is sponsoring this event today, but if they wanted to work with you to learn some more strategies for eliminating tension and stress in their playing through yoga, how might they be able to get in touch with you? And also, like, since Dr. Sparks is also a flutist, if you ever want to talk to her about some flute lessons or something like that, how can they get in touch with you?
Okay, so I'm putting a whole bunch of stuff up here in the chat. So my email is just lsparks@valdosta.edu. That's an easy one to remember. And then my website, because I'm also a health coach, I put my yoga stuff on the website with my health coach stuff. So it's wellness.llsparks.com. So either one of those would be easy ways to find me. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for coming and joining me. I love midday yoga. Now you guys get to go eat lunch. And thank you for having me, Heidi.
Of course.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody. Thanks for being here.